Yes, give me a second and I'll see if I stopped your recording.
Sure. Oh, cool. Our screens are there.
Yeah. You just click here. Slides.
Great, cool. So I suppose I should start with an introduction of myself. My name is Simon Göteborg, if you know how to pronounce Swedish. I've been a professional game designer for about a decade now. And I've worked on 4 big projects that I was just quickly mention. There's the Battlerite, which is an arena PvP I made at Stonelock Studios. There's Battlerite Royale, which is also a PvP game. Then we have the Rising, which is a survival game with PvP servers. And I've left Stonelock recently to lead a project over at Ludosity, which is not announced yet, but it's also a PvP game. And this is not a coincidence. I started playing competitive games in 2006, going to tournaments, and I've been really passionate about it ever since then. We got, let's see, yes, there's the Kovda Smash series, which I hosted, about 1 monthly tournament every month here in Kovda. And I've also coached a lot of players like Noxy there on the list, placing 5th in a tournament. Not a huge tournament, but I've been pretty involved with the community for a very long time. And yeah, I still am. And so aside from all the competitive games that I've always been focused on, I've always gravitated towards difficult games. So I grew up with retro games that are these days known to be very difficult. I play a lot of Tetris, which is a high score game that you can basically push forever. And then obviously Dark Souls and those types of modern difficult game. That's very much what I play. And it's pretty weird, right? Because normally when you buy a product, you want it to do the thing it's supposed to do, that you want it to do. But with video games, there's a certain appeal to the fact that the game is just not doing what you want it to do, which is something I've been trying to understand as a game designer for many years now. So, wait, I think it skipped a bunch of slides. Let me see. Oh, okay, that or I forgot to put them in. Either way. Yeah, so, right. I was going to say that I know it kind of sounds like bragging, bringing up like a bunch of difficult games and competing, but I'm not good at these games. I'm just very willing to tolerate losing. I probably lose more than most people because I try these games that are actually too hard for me. And I find that there's a very big difference between people in how they respond to losses in games. There are people who you lose once or twice in a boss and the game is just too difficult for you. And you have people who play for hours on the same boss. And I'm over there fighting the same guy for 12 hours, even though I can just literally just walk around him. Because that's how I like my games. And I don't really mind losing for 12 hours. There is, that I just wanted to mention, there's a great video about the psychology of losing made on a channel called Daryl Talks Games. Are you guys familiar with that channel? No? Nobody? Okay, well, it's great. You should check it out. So basically a guy who talks about video game design from the perspective of peer-reviewed psychology papers, and he brings up various phenomena and how they express themselves in games. So highly recommend it if you're into game design in any way. But he brought up these 2 different types of responses that people give to losing. One of them is he calls it the promotion focused and the prevention focused. Actually, those are the technical terms. And the promotion focused player is focused on winning. And if they play a hard game, it's because they want to achieve something difficult. And then the prevention focused player is more about not losing. So yeah, I think this also was borne out in the data that the people who play not to lose rather than play to win don't tend to do as well mentally. I having been in a competitive environment for many years, I definitely noticed the difference. I myself was very much a play not to lose type of player. And fortunately, I've been able to move away from that. But essentially, I know it sounds weird that I'm like, I say that I don't mind losing, but also that I'm playing not to lose. But to me, losing is to not play the game at all. So as long as I'm playing, I'm not losing, because I could always win later. And I think it's interesting to have, especially if you're not this type of player yourself. I think it's extra interesting as a game designer to understand how these type of people think. But even if you have a tolerance for losing, there's this question of, well, why would you even want to do that? It's like even if you're willing to tolerate it, like what is it actually adding to the experience? And if you ask people this, there are two common responses. Right, this panel was supposed to go before. Yeah, this is an example of why in most situations you want the product to do the thing it's supposed to do, and you don't like this feature of randomly combusting 1% of the time, whereas in a video game, you can get just fucked over completely. The game doesn't do it all. I mean, roguelikes, right? You can spend hours on a run, and then something goes wrong, you die, you lose a bunch of progress, and apparently that's part of the appeal. Like, how does this work? Right, this was the thing I was going to say about what people say is the reason. Basically, they argue that the harder something is, the more satisfying it feels to achieve it, which taps into the sunk cost fallacy, which you guys heard about it. Okay, this one is fairly known, so I hope you know. Right, yeah. Basically, the more you invest in something, the more valuable it is to you. And there was this study I heard about where a woman had sold lottery tickets, and then she would try to buy them back the day before they would assign a winner. And she was doing this to test like how much more would you have to pay to buy back the ticket compared to what she sold it for. And she actually did this with two different groups. One of them had to assign a number to the ticket, and the other ones just got a ticket. And what she noticed was that just the simple process of putting a number on a ticket was enough to make people ask for significantly more money in exchange for buying the ticket back. So this is definitely not something to underestimate. This is why a lot of games, you want to get people through the door, you want to make them invest anything in the game at all, and then you can keep them from there. The other phenomenon at play here, I think, is exclusivity. Like, the more difficult it is to beat a game, the more impressive it seems because other people either can't or won't do it. I think this taps into an instinctual understanding of what's it called, supply and demand. But it does, like, even when it doesn't make sense in a like economics perspective, or even if the thing is not hard, just being the only person who has done it still is something that tends to appeal to people. And as an example for this, I wanted to bring up Tetris Grandmaster, which was in the list of games I played quite a lot. Does anyone know about Tetris Grandmaster 3? I'm guessing no. Right, so Tetris, there's a million versions, right? Tetris Grandmaster 3 is the most popular by far version if you want to play like hardcore score attack Tetris. It came out a bunch of years ago. I think it was like over a decade at this point. But since they want everybody playing on the same version, this is like the standard version for Tetris, unless you're playing old school Tetris, in which I think the NES version is the standard. But the point is, I could geek out about this for a long time. What I want to say is that the game is stupid hard. If you want to reach the highest rank, the game is very fast. You can, as you can see, you barely have any time to move the pieces. And the speed level here is 600 out of 999. And It basically just goes faster and faster and faster. And when you finally beat level 999 on the highest difficulty, the blocks start becoming invisible and you're in the credit screen and you have to survive through the credit screen while the blocks become invisible. Yeah, and so the thing is, I want to go into the detail, but I won't because it would take too long. But basically, you have to reach the highest rank in the game called Grandmaster. That's why it's Tetris Grandmaster. You have to do all of this. And this is the easy part. This is beginner stuff. And there are only 6 people in the entire world who've ever got the Grandmaster ranking. And I don't know about you guys, but when I hear that, even though I know I'm never going to be one of those people, like there's a bit of me that's like, that's fucking cool. I want to do that. Wouldn't it be awesome if I was one of those 7 peoples? This guy, by the way, I think he's the only American who's ever got the Grandmaster rank. And you can see him like breaking apart. Like he's been streaming for years. So yeah, obviously just the game being hard in itself can be something that attracts people to the game. But why are you playing games? If you want something difficult, there are many, many hard things you can do in life. Like try to make $1 million, or become a famous musician, or learn how to love yourself. And it just seems like there are things that are hard and important. There are things that are easy and frivolous. And there are easy and important things like eating food. But what are you doing over there? Like, what are you doing here? Like, there has to be something else that motivates this behavior, or it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So to explain this, I feel like we have to go pretty deep into human psychology. So there was this book, Man Playing Games, that I read as a student in this school. How many of you guys are game designers, reading game design? Okay, do you still have to read this book? Okay, yeah. Huh?
I would just like to say, we in year 2, we just had this smaller course. And I don't know how you translate it. Teoretiska samhälleliga perspektiv på spel, and that book was referenced there.
Right. Okay. So when I was reading, when I went to the game design course in this school, most people hated this book. I hated this book. It seemed stupid. But the thing that I came to realize is that I was looking for a book about game design. This is a book about humans. And so the subject of this book is what kind of games are there? This list is extremely outdated. That's what all my classmates focused on and ridiculed because the list is bad. But also where do games come from? Why do we play them? And what is the social utility of games? Like, why do they exist? I mean, somebody has to make them, right? And I think most people kind of just assume that games are fun. That's why they're made. But there's a reason we think things are fun. Like the reason we like sugar is because it has a lot of energy, and that's important for humans to survive. What are games doing? So if we go back through time, if I ask somebody what's the first game, I think a lot of reflexes are going to give me like, oh, Pong. But obviously there were physical games before that, and before that, and I mean chess is old, right? But this is the first game that we know ever existed, like physical game. But even before that, oh wait, before I go on to that point, this is what the rule book looks like. This is the actual rule book for the game. I don't know how they got past this thing here, but that makes it hard to figure out the rules. On second thought, I don't even know if people know what the rules are for this game. They might have been lost to time. Anyway, yeah, games are older than human beings. Animals play games. And so since all kinds of animals play games, and obviously not all animals, well, if you go far enough back, all animals have a shared ancestor, but there are different branches. And all of them, well, not all of them, most animals play. So we should assume that there's a reason people have arrived at play within, many different species. Everybody does it. Keep exaggerating. It's not everybody. That habit of exaggerating. So this is my theory, essentially, and it seems to be, I think, fairly uncontroversial if you talk to any people who study anthropology, animal psychology, and so on. I think that we seek out uncertainty, which is part of my personal vocabulary. I will go into a little bit more in detail later what that means. I think that we're seeking out uncertainty in a controlled environment to prepare ourselves for the things that we can't avoid. So for lion cubs, for example, they will wrestle each other, and that's preparing for combat where they don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so they need to be able to prepare for that. Even if they're not going to fight other animals, even if the strategies that are optimal might be slightly different, a lion cub fighting a lion cub is close enough that they can get some useful experience. And yeah, we like certainty. I think any animal that I would classify as able to think like certainty, because it allows us to make reliable long-term plans. We even like certainty so much that even if it hurts us, we might want it. So like, there's a classic thing where like, there was this cool movie back in the day called, I think it was Big Fish or whatever. It was a guy who heard about how he was going to die, and nobody else wanted to hear how they were going to die because, that's awful. You know that your death is coming, and you know what's going to happen, and you're going to live the rest of your life worrying about it. But his argument was that, well, if I know how I'm going to die, then I know that everything else is safe. Essentially, the point is, there is information that is concerning and hurts us that we still want just for the utility of being able to plan around it. I think this is why people are drawn more so to bad news than good news, because it's important for us to be able to plan around anything bad that might happen. Knowledge is power. I mean, this is where the saying comes from, right? Just want to know as much as possible so we can plan as precisely as possible. Those that dislike uncertainty for the opposite reasons, obviously, it can ruin our plans. It will spoil long-term investments. We can sometimes even dislike uncertainty so much that we would rather lose than try and fail. Even if trying has very low cost and, let's say, 5% success chance, we might just immediately give up because we don't want to have to deal with the uncertainty of the process of trying. And this is another Lovecraft quote: "The oldest and deepest fear is the fear of the unknown." And you see this in horror movies where pretty much everyone agrees nowadays that you shouldn't show the monster too early, because if the viewer sees the monster, they know what it looks like, and that makes it less scary. You can never escape uncertainty. The world is just too big, and there's too much to know. You're never going to learn all of it. And even if you lock yourself in your room, it will come for you eventually, right? You're going to age, things are going to change. By the way, does anyone know what this game is? You get bonus points or whatever. I don't actually have any bonus points to hand out, but if I did, you would definitely get them. It's Humanity. It's about a girl who is doing a dream journal because she's stuck at home and she's too scared of going outside. Anyway, you must become strong. We love to resolve uncertainty because our brains are built for pattern matching. The more patterns we uncover, the more certain things become, and the unknown is vanquished through observation. Basically, just observe things you don't understand for long enough. You will start detecting patterns, and hopefully they're real patterns, and that gives you knowledge, that gives you power. But even if they're not real patterns, you get to feel like you understand them. So there's this thing where like being wrong and thinking you're right feels identical to actually being right. So the fact that you might be wrong about the patterns you observe doesn't change anything. We still appreciate detecting new patterns, essentially. And when I say patterns, I'm using this term very broadly. like learning the geography of an area. I count that as understanding the pattern of the space you're in. So yeah, there's a few examples, just exploring spaces, strategies, any type of exploring, really, discovering secrets, but also, you know, seeing a narrative. If you're watching a thriller, obviously the uncertainty, like what's going to happen, is part of the appeal. And what we're looking for is the resolution. So if you have like a murder mystery and the resolution is bad, it retroactively ruins the whole show because it was building on this idea that you were going to get rewarded with a resolution to the uncertainty. And I think gambling is really interesting because it's really tapping into this human instinct of pursuing uncertainty within certain conditions that I will focus on later. But like, it's not useful generally to gamble. So yeah, here's me trying to argue with myself. The question is, does it work? This strategy of pursuing uncertainty. I mean, there's many skills that aren't directly applicable to life that you learn from games. Like, you're never gonna need to know how to use a mouse to aim a gun in reality. I mean, unless we invent some kind of war machines for that, but whatever. You get the point, right? There's many things we learn about in games that are just not useful in life. And most animals, they hunt. That's how they play, or they run away. Nobody needs a Tetris grandmaster. And if you actually look at what it says here, this is the name of the screen. Throw your life away for Tetris. Why would you do that? Seems like a dumb idea. So I think this is a serious question. I know, I feel like a lot of people in the games industry, they just want to make games, they just want to make art. To me, this is like a serious moral question. Should we be directing our attention and our resources towards this? I don't know. I think it depends on the game. Gambling, like I said, it's an example of being full of uncertainty, but it's actually bad for you. I think this is it. I've run out of slides. From here on, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Actually, that's kind of untrue. I have this type of slide. There's nothing on it. But those words mean something to me. Yeah, games. I think of games as being pretty similar to, you know, stories that people would tell around the fire in a tribe. You know, you're hearing the story of something because stories tend to focus on problems, right? It's just like one of the fundamental rules of drama is there needs to be attention to the story. And the whole point, the reason we like stories is because they have tension from the uncertainty and the resolution, and we can learn from other people's situations and apply it in our own lives. But even if this situation is fictional, even if we know that it's fictional, we can still extract abstract rules, you know, the moral of the story. And I think we do the exact same thing with games. I think that playing games teaches you a lot of things that you didn't even know that you learned by playing them. Control environments. Yes, this was the thing where, so we have both an attraction and an aversion to uncertainty. And controlled environments is what I consider to be the difference between what makes it attractive or unattractive. So if you get surprised by things just not working out, that's always going to be a negative experience. There's, you know, disappointment is heavy negative thing. But the thing about there's a difference between unexpected uncertainty and expected uncertainty. So when I roll a dice, I know what the probabilities are. I know I'm making the choice to roll the dice, which is different than, you know, somebody just coming into my life from nowhere and doing something I haven't consented to. Like, even if it's something arguably good for me, just the lack of control involved when you haven't agreed to engage with the uncertainty. Obviously, risk is another thing as well, right? I was going to do a joke I didn't have time for about Dark Souls, do you know the tagline of the original Dark Souls? Prepare to die. You wouldn't put that if you were selling airline tickets, right? There's no way, no way. Yeah, I was gonna have a Photoshop of Ryanair on the Dark Souls cover, whatever. The thing is, why would they say prepare to die? Isn't this just gonna scare off customers? I actually think it does the opposite, right? Prepare to die means, this game's hard. You're going to lose. That's the point. If you're choosing to play this game and you die, it's fine. You haven't lost anything, right? It's different if you're playing a children's game in front of other adults and you're losing. That's going to hurt your status, right? That's embarrassing. But if you're playing Dark Souls and you're dying a million times in a stream, that's fine, because everybody knows the game is hard, right? So actually saying prepare to die makes the game more approachable. It's less scary. Both because it signals losing is fine, and because it signals there will be uncertainty that you will have to conquer if you want to play this game. Was there something else I want to talk about here? Risk, how much are you failing, social status, warning people. Yeah, I hate it when video games have enemies that look silly but are really powerful. And then I get beaten up by like a sea urchin or whatever when I'm an anime fighter with a big sword. I hate it. Anyway. What is the challenge and what is the tool? So these are words that mean some things to me. So for me, I make a distinction between the part of the game that is the challenge, the thing that is supposed to be out of your control, right? Because if you just control everything, it's not a game, in my opinion, it's a tool. So have you guys heard of Mario Paint? I might be dating myself here. Right. Yeah, so Mario Paint is essentially a game. It's on a game console, it's on a game cartridge. You interact through the buttons, but it's really just a very primitive painting tool. You can make music in it. And it's got Mario. Like, is this really a game? I would argue no, because the tool is set up so that you can do the thing you want to do as easily and flexibly as possible. That's what a tool is. That's why Photoshop is not a game. It's made to be within your control. Whereas the challenge is the part of the game that's made to be outside of your control. Because, I mean, you can't make, at least not a digital game, without including a tool, right? You need a controller, you need to be able to interact. So you have an interface with the game, which is the tool, which you want everything to work as intended. Everything should go just the way you want it. And then you have the challenge, which is it's allowed to fight back. How much it's allowed to fight back? Well, it depends on who you ask. Now, the problem with this distinction is that people disagree about where the challenge ends and the tool begins, right? So in Melee, the main game I play in tournaments, there's this thing where when you do if you do an attack in the air and then you land, you have to press a button to make your character get up and be able to control them faster. And this is about a 1/10 of a second, the timing that you need in order to make this happen. And strategically, it's relevant. You just want to do this all the time, always the optimal option. But in terms of executing on your strategy, you can sometimes fail, and you need to go into training mode. You need to practice this stuff if you want to compete. And some people say, this is stupid. Why would you put this in the game? Right? It's not more interesting. It's not more strategic. Doesn't add anything to the game. It just makes it so that I have to go into training mode and practice muscle memory. That's dumb. Well, I mean, if you see it as part of the tool, it is, yeah. If you see it as part of the controller, the tool you're supposed to be using to make the things you want to happen, then yes, it's stupid. If you see it as a part of the game, though, I mean, I don't think you have an argument, right? Like, it's just part of the challenge of the game. They're like bowling. You know, well, why can't I just hit exactly where I want every time? Well, it would ruin the entire game. So I don't know if it's different now, but growing up in the era I did, there were many angry arguments on the internet about how games should be designed, that I think it all boils down to which parts do you see as the tool and which parts do you see as the game? And I think a dangerous thing is that, you know, humanity as a whole, or game design as a field, we understand how to make tools. We're not quite as good at creating compelling challenges. And if you're trying to appeal to as many people as possible, and the people who say, you know, people will voice their frustrations, but they're not going to say, oh, I'm actually fine with this thing being difficult because that's not a problem to me, right? So if you're trying to, like, what's it called? Can't remember what it's called in English, but yeah, if you're trying to just polish it by removing anything that could be a frustration for any player, what you end up with is a game is 100% tool and 0% challenge, right? Because there's always going to be someone who's like, could we just make this thing easier? And if you always listen to those people, you don't have a challenge anymore. And I mean, you can still make an appealing game, right? You can have a good story, you just have good vibes in general. But for me, for someone who's looking for the challenge, which I think everybody is to some extent, it's just, I hate those games. I would rather just do nothing, essentially.
I think a bit of the problem, especially today's society, with all these instant gratification, both in games and social media, you know, you have that constant dopamine hit, which people are chasing.
Mhm.
And, yeah,
I suppose that could be part of it. Like, if people are expecting results much sooner than they were in the past, they might be less willing to deal with difficult controllers, but I'm not sure I buy it. Like, I mean, Flappy Bird went home pretty well with the casuals, right? And that's, I mean, all that game is just trying to make the character go where you want them to go, right? I mean, there are whole games built on the idea that the controller is bad, like QWOP, if you know what that is, or Surgeon Simulator, Octodad. There's a bunch of games in this genre, and the whole point is that the controller is bad because the controller being bad is part of the challenge, not part of the tool. StarCraft had a similar thing when they made StarCraft 2. They made it so you can select a lot more units and move them together as a group because they felt like, I mean, I would say that the RTS genre in general has this issue where people who are attracted to the fantasy of an RTS generally want to focus on the strategy parts. They don't want to focus on the clicking parts. But because it's real time, that becomes super important. You add about? Yeah, I mean, I suppose. Yeah, so you're saying you would dislike having high challenge because it's, are you saying high challenge or are you saying challenge on specific things? Right. So maybe this is just me being out of touch because I've grown up in a community, people focusing on competitive fighting games. But for me, I don't associate doing the same thing over and over again with difficulty at all. Like, it might take a lot of tries to be successful, but I hear some people speak about like MMORPGs and they say, oh, it's so hard to get this thing because you have to grind for hours and hours and hours. And to me, that's not categorized as hard because it just takes a long time. Does that address what you said, or? Right, yeah, and I mean, there are people who try to mitigate this issue. That's sort of what the whole roguelike genre is based on, right? You make the experience of every new try somewhat different so that people don't get bored of trying the same thing over and over again. But I think that's a double-edged sword because on one hand, you're making it less boring to repeat the same thing. But I would say if it's a skill-based game and you're forced to repeat the same thing over and over, it's because you're doing it wrong because you don't understand it. Like, I very much believe that understanding is 99% of skill in pretty much any field. And sometimes it's an understanding that you can't put in words, but I would argue that if you're stuck on a level because it's too hard, there's probably something you're not understanding about it. Sorry. Yes, I think that's what I wanted to say on this point. I hope we're gonna have time for questions later. I might be going. We got 9 minutes left. Okay. I think we're almost done here though, and then people can ask questions or make comments. Right, I think this is the final slide. Yes. Sources of uncertainty, right? So I believe that every game needs uncertainty to be appealing. I think that there are many ways to create uncertainty. And I think that the means you choose to create your uncertainty actually affects the game a lot more than most people realize. I've seen game designers who they want to get rid of randomness, and they consider trying to predict your opponent, that counts as randomness. Whether or not you can aim correctly, that counts as randomness. And they try to get rid of all the randomness, and then they end up with a game that doesn't have any uncertainty, and the game just sucks and nobody wants to play it. Every time I've seen somebody doing this, it's never worked out. I think games need uncertainty, and I believe there's a lot we can learn from observing the source of the uncertainty or the type of uncertainty that we're using in the game. And I could probably do another talk for like an hour on different types of uncertainty because I'm a nerd. I have a 15-page document specifying different types. But yeah, essentially I would say it breaks down into 4 major categories. It's actual randomness, for just you've never played the game before, so you couldn't possibly know it. That's what I call arbitrary uncertainty. Then we have interpersonal uncertainty. I don't know what you're going to do, and I don't have time to wait and look. I have to make a decision immediately, which can be used either competitively, as in rock, paper, scissors, or it can be used cooperatively. Overcooked? Right. So Overcooked is a game which is largely focused on team coordination. It's not hard as long as you're coordinating with your team. But if 2 people try to fix the same task at the same time, everything just sucks. So you can do well in that game by just understanding your teammates and getting a feel. Oh, he's probably going to go there, so I'm going to go to this thing. But then if you just want to beat the game easily, you just plan out ahead of time exactly what everyone's going to do. And then you've sort of solved that uncertainty. And I think this is what happens when people put more and more effort into getting good at games, is that they try to eliminate every source of uncertainty. And they want to do that because they want to resolve the uncertainty. That's their whole goal. That's why they play. They're trying to get good. But at the same time, if you allow them to resolve all the uncertainty, then the game's just boring. Right? They've ruined the game for themselves. So, right. Arbitrary uncertainty, such as randomness, is immune to this, which is one of the reasons it's useful. It's also frustrating because you can't necessarily get that much better at it. Interpersonal works pretty well, I would say, though it's also difficult to get better. There are some people who are just have this, it almost feels supernatural how well they can predict your every move. But actually training that is incredibly difficult. So if you want the players to experience gradual improvement, it's hard to base a game entirely on that. And then there's the execution, aiming correctly, right timing, quick reactions. And then the 4th category, I would say, is strategic depth, which I could also do at least another hour on. How to create deep games and what does even depth even mean, right? It's a positive word. When you say this game is deep, that's a compliment, right? Nobody says a game is deep as an insult. So we all know it's good, but what is it? Sorry, that's another topic. I'm getting distracted. Right. Dice is prediction. It's tamed chaos in a crystallized form. It is. I think the dice is a very strong symbol. A lot of people like the dice. It's used in many games just because it's so potent, right? You can create so much chaos with this tiny little thing that you also have complete control over. And I'm trailing off. Questions, maybe? Comments?
Just like to know your opinion on a thing. You said you played Melee, so what's your opinion on in Like in Brawl, they introduced this mechanic where the character can randomly trick.
Yeah.
So my opinion on that, because that's some level of uncertainty and challenge. And on what I've seen, the community hate them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that anybody liked that. You know, Masahiro Sakurai, I have a personal beef with that guy, right? But, you know, trying to be respectful and look at it from the perspective of a designer instead of my own preferences. What he said that his goal was that he wanted Smash to be a party game. He wanted people from different skill levels to be able to come together and play. Without having, I think he said literally, I want to create a game where the best player doesn't always win. The thing is, he didn't even succeed in that, right? Because there's still brawl tournaments. There's still people who could beat my ass and everybody else's ass super easily every day. So like, he didn't even achieve the thing he intended to do with a mechanic, which is, I think is, yeah, he just pissed people off for no benefit, essentially. I mean, I think it's fine to say, okay, this game is just not for competitive people. I might even try to actively discourage them from playing the game. I mean, I'd hate it, but you can do that. But I would judge the quality of game design by trying to figure out, okay, what were they targeting and did they hit it? And I would say that's a mechanic that just didn't even get close to what it was targeting. Yeah, I hope that answers your question or comment. Anything else? Okay. Cool.
Thank you, Simon.